She rolled up to the bank counter with a quiet smile and decades of strength behind her eyes. But the teller only saw a frail black woman in a wheelchair, dismissed her, mocked her, called her sweetheart, and waved her off like a burden. What she didn't know, this woman had once written policies that shaped the very bank she worked in, and in less than 5 minutes, she would end the teller's career without raising her voice. The glass doors of Riverpoint First Bank opened with a gentle sigh at 9:01 a.m., letting in the pale wash of morning light and a faint breeze that carried the scent of nearby coffee. The lobby smelled of fresh carpet cleaner and printer toner. A black woman in a wheelchair rolled in, slow and steady. She wore a navy shawl draped neatly over her shoulders, slacks pressed clean, shoes polished but worn at the tips. Her hair was pulled back into a low bun streaked with silver, and a faded leather bag rested in her lap. No one looked up. Behind the reception counter, someone laughed at a joke that wasn't funny. A teller sipped from a tall iced coffee, while tapping the back of her pen against the glass. Across the room, a man in khakis argued into his phone about overdraft fees, and Rosa Jean Holloway kept rolling. Her hands moved with practiced rhythm, the quiet strength of someone who had never asked for help climbing a hill, even if she had to do it seated. She paused once, halfway through the marble-floored lobby, and looked around. Not like someone lost, more like someone measuring the room. She took in the layout: 3 tellers at the front, 2 desks off to the right, and a waiting area with dark leather chairs. Everything was quiet, neutral, impersonal, the kind of place designed to keep people moving. She wasn't in a rush. She wheeled up to the far left counter, where a blonde woman with a stiff smile and tired eyes was straightening her blouse. The woman didn't look up. Rosa waited, counted 2 full seconds. Then softly, "Good morning." The teller finally glanced her way. "You need to use the kiosk, sweetheart. That's for basic transactions." "I'm not here to make a transaction." "Well," the woman said, louder now, "someone will be with you shortly." She didn't say it kindly. She didn't even look at her. Rosa simply nodded. There was no visible reaction, no furrow of the brow, no breath drawn sharp. She reached into her leather bag and carefully unfolded a slim set of documents, placing them neatly on the counter. The teller, Vanessa, as her name tag read, sighed audibly, then turned and muttered something to the woman beside her. Something Rosa heard clearly. She probably wants to file a complaint, or just needs someone to talk to. The words weren't cruel in tone. They didn't have to be. They landed all the same. No one turned to look, but across the lobby, at desk number 3, a young banker named David Lynn slowly closed his laptop. He hadn't even heard her name yet. But something about the way Rosa Jean Holloway sat there, quiet, still, unbothered, told him this morning wasn't going to unfold the way anyone expected, and she wasn't done. Not even close. "Sweetheart, you're in the way." The words came out light, almost sing-song, like Vanessa thought she was being charming. Like Rosa Jean Holloway's presence was a minor inconvenience, not a human being. Rosa had barely finished her second sentence when Vanessa raised a hand without looking. "We've got a line forming," she added, though there wasn't one. "You're going to have to move to the side. Someone will assist you." Rosa didn't move, not out of stubbornness, but because she'd heard that tone before. It wasn't new. It was rehearsed. The casual dismissal coated in a brittle smile, just polite enough to go unchecked. Behind the counter, Vanessa turned toward her co-worker, a brunette named Mallory. "I swear," she muttered, not really lowering her voice. "Some people treat this place like a therapy center. Come in here needing attention like it's a free service." Mallory didn't respond. She didn't laugh either. She just looked past Vanessa's shoulder toward Rosa, and then quickly looked away. The moment didn't explode. It cracked, softly. A client near the brochure stand blinked, unsure if she heard right. An older man in a baseball cap glanced up, then down again. No one said anything. Not yet. At her desk, Rosa unfolded the rest of the packet she had brought. Slow, careful movements. Her hands were steady. Not flustered, not trembling. She held the papers like they were familiar, like she'd handled more serious documents, under more serious pressure 100 times before. Vanessa, still typing something into her terminal, barely glanced down. "Look, if you're here to cash something or open an account, I need a form of ID and a social." "I'm not here for that," Rosa said calmly. Then I don't know how I'm supposed to help you. Vanessa gave a customer service smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. The atmosphere in the lobby tightened, not from volume, but tension. The kind of shift you don't notice until your chest feels just a little heavier. From his desk, David Lynn slowly stood up. Not all the way, just enough to get a better look. He tilted his head. Something was wrong here. Vanessa leaned forward now, elbows on the counter, her tone growing clipped. Ma'am, if you don't have a reason to be at the teller station, I'm going to need you to deliver this to your branch manager, Rosa said, not loud, not confrontational, just clear. She tapped the top page of the packet once with her finger. No threat in the motion, just certainty. Vanessa stared at it, unimpressed. Right, because he's just dying to hear from you this morning. The words hung there for a beat too long, and across the lobby, someone finally whispered, "She didn't just say that, did she?" No one answered, but now the silence wasn't quiet. It was loaded. The paper made no sound when Rosa slid it forward, just the quiet friction of worn edges against laminate. She tapped it once with her finger. Deliberate, not forceful, like someone pressing the final period on a sentence they've written 1,000 times before. Vanessa didn't look at it. Instead, she rolled her eyes so hard it was almost theatrical, then gave Mallory a smirk that curled just a little too much. "We've got ourselves some grandma paperwork," she muttered. "Just loud enough. Handwritten letters and coupons, I bet." Mallory didn't smile. Neither did anyone else. Rosa didn't flinch. She simply kept her hands folded in her lap, gaze calm and steady. The paper on the counter sat untouched, 3 pages, neatly clipped, with a header embossed in gold. The kind of document that wasn't made at home, the kind banks usually pay attention to. Vanessa reached for her stapler instead. "You can leave that here," she said, not even glancing down. "I'll get to it when I can." "I'd prefer it be handed directly to your manager," Rosa said. Vanessa sighed like someone being inconvenienced at the worst possible time. Despite the lobby still being mostly empty, she leaned over and gave the packet a lazy poke, pushing it a few inches to the side, like it offended her desk space. "I said I'll get to it." Across the room, David Lynn had now fully risen from his desk. He wasn't sure what made him step forward, only that something in Rosa's posture, composed, unwavering, didn't match the way she was being spoken to. He took a slow step forward. "Excuse me," he called gently. "Ma'am, would you like me to?" "I've got it, David," Vanessa snapped without turning. "Go back to your desk." David paused, his mouth opened slightly, then closed. He stayed where he was, eyes fixed on the document still sitting in no man's land. Rosa glanced at him, just once, then back to Vanessa. "Please," Rosa said again, softer now. "It's important that the right person sees this." Vanessa finally looked at the top line. She didn't read it, just scanned, eyes skimming too fast to register anything. Then she gave a dry laugh. "Oh, okay, so it's one of those forms. People love pulling out old paperwork, thinking it makes them important." She pushed it again with one manicured nail. "We're not running a history museum, sweetheart." There it was. The last word landed like a slap dressed as a hug. This time, even Mallory winced. And David took another step forward, because now the air had changed completely, not just uncomfortable, but heavy, like a current had passed through the room and grounded itself in the silence. Rosa said nothing. She simply adjusted her shawl, and waited. David Lynn had been sitting at desk 3, halfway through reviewing a client's mortgage file, when the energy in the room shifted, so subtle at first, it barely registered. But something about the way Vanessa's voice sliced through the stillness made him pause. He didn't look up right away. He just listened. David was the kind of employee who rarely raised his voice, rarely took up space. 29, sharp, always early, always respectful. He kept a low profile, worked clean and paid attention. And now, he was paying attention to this. The tone, the forced sweetness, the way sweetheart came out with a knife tucked behind the word. He glanced over the top of his screen. That's when he saw her. The woman in the wheelchair. Something in her presence pulled at him. Not because she looked important. She didn't. That was the point. But there was a calmness to her. A poise that didn't shrink even when Vanessa's words turned condescending. He could see the paper Rosa had placed on the counter. Gold lettering at the top. Thick bond paper. The kind no one uses unless it matters. David stood up quietly, inching closer. Not to intervene. Not yet. Just to see. And that's when he saw the name. Rosa Jean Holloway. He blinked. Once. Twice. The name was familiar. Not just from headlines or client records. No, he'd seen it during onboarding. In a slideshow. A picture in black and white. A woman at a podium in the 1980s, with a microphone in one hand, and a banking charter in the other. Rosa Jean Holloway. One of the original architects of the Community Access Lending Act, the very legislation that made Riverpoint first, one of the first inclusive banks in the state. David's spine straightened. This wasn't a mistake. It was worse. He looked at Vanessa, still lounging against the counter like she was waiting for lunch, still smirking, still brushing the paper aside like it was a menu someone left behind. David swallowed hard. He wasn't senior enough to override her. Not technically. But protocol felt smaller than principle in that moment. He opened his mouth, then stopped. Not yet. He watched Rosa instead. She hadn't moved, hadn't raised her voice, but her stillness was louder than any outburst. It was the stillness of someone who had seen these moments before, someone who didn't need to fight to win. David's hand drifted toward the corner of his desk, brushing against his phone, just in case, because something was happening, and it wasn't over. Vanessa scoffed, loud enough that it bounced off the lobby walls and turned a few heads. "I told you," she said, flipping through a stack of deposit slips. "We don't handle complaints at the counter." The emphasis landed with a practiced edge, sharpened by repetition, dulled by empathy long gone. David winced. He wasn't the only one. A man by the coffee station paused mid-sip. An older woman near the loan brochures shifted in her chair. Still, Rosa Jean Holloway didn't move. Her hands rested lightly in her lap, her spine upright, gaze level. "I understand," she said, voice like morning fog, gentle but unmissable. "But I'd still like this delivered to your branch manager." Vanessa raised her brows, glanced at Mallory again, and gave an exaggerated sigh. "I swear," she muttered. Louder now. "These people think if they just repeat something enough, they'll magically get their way. These people." It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Rosa didn't flinch. She'd heard worse, from people with louder voices and sharper tongues, from boardrooms and buses, from strangers and senators. This wasn't new. She adjusted her shawl with one hand and calmly pushed the packet back toward Vanessa. The gold seal caught the light. Vanessa didn't notice. She rolled her eyes and leaned over it like it might bite her. "Ma'am," she said, teeth clenched behind the smile. "I don't know what this is supposed to be, but we have procedures. If you've got a complaint, take it online or call the hotline. This isn't a concierge desk." She laughed at her own joke. No one joined her. David took another step forward. His pulse had picked up. The name on that folder wasn't a coincidence. And the way Vanessa kept pushing, louder and lazier with every word, it wasn't just unprofessional now, it was reckless. "I'm happy to wait," Rosa said again. No edge, no heat, just the kind of calm that made noise feel smaller by comparison. "But I will not leave this document with someone who refuses to read it." Vanessa blinked. The room was quiet. Not silent, but watching. The teller beside her, Mallory, shifted uncomfortably, finally speaking under her breath. "Maybe just call Dana." "I don't take orders from you," Vanessa snapped. David's jaw tightened. The room was no longer passive. It was primed. And still, Rosa sat there, unmoved. Not passive, prepared. By the ATM, a woman in pale blue scrubs held her card halfway into the slot, frozen. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes narrowing. "Did she just say that out loud?" she murmured. No one answered, but across the lobby, several shoulders stiffened. A man reading a magazine stopped mid-page. A security guard near the door adjusted his belt, unsure if he should move or stay put. A teenager beside his grandfather glanced up from his phone. Everyone had heard it. These people. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They settled, quiet and ugly. And still, Rosa Jean Holloway didn't raise her voice. She reached slowly into her leather bag again, and drew out a second document. This one crisp, perfectly folded, the edges aligned like it had been placed with care, not speed. She set it gently beside the first, unfolding it with both hands. This page had weight, not just in thickness but in presence. At the top, a bold header in serif font. Below it, a seal, embossed, silver, and a signature. Wide, clear, deliberate. Vanessa didn't look. She was too busy typing into her screen, face flushed with the kind of forced composure that only tightens when you know you've gone too far, but haven't realized how far yet. David saw it. From where he stood now, 2 steps from the counter, he recognized the signature. The Regional Director of Community Affairs. He glanced at Rosa, then at the paper, then back to Vanessa. "Vanessa," he said carefully, "you may want to look at that document." She waved him off again. "David, if you're trying to impress the new hires, now's not the time." Mallory said nothing, but her eyes were locked on the silver seal. She knew, or at least, she suspected. Rosa didn't move. She simply folded her hands again, letting the 2 documents rest like anchors on the surface between them. The Scrubs woman at the ATM abandoned her transaction and stood quietly to the side, watching. Her arms were folded now, not confrontational, just attentive. Across the room, the teenager leaned toward his grandfather. "Is that lady someone important?" The grandfather didn't answer. He just kept watching. The temperature in the room wasn't hot. It was precise, like the moment before a conductor lifts their hand, the second before the drop. And through it all, Rosa sat like marble, measured, unmoved, and more present than anyone else in the building. She didn't need the room to understand who she was. She was just giving them the chance. David Lynn didn't move quickly. He moved deliberately. He stepped away from his desk with his hands loosely at his sides, the way you do when you're approaching a line someone else already crossed. His heart was in his throat, but his voice, when it came, was calm. "Ma'am," he said gently, addressing Rosa. "Not Vanessa. Would you mind if I take a quick look at your document?" Vanessa turned before Rosa could answer. She planted her palm flat on the counter, like a referee calling time out. "She's just here to stir up something," she said with a strained smile that didn't hide the sharpness beneath. "Let me handle it." David blinked. He looked at her hand on the counter, then at Rosa, who hadn't reacted, still seated, still steady, still watching. "Vanessa," he said, choosing his words like stepping stones across ice. "I just think it might be worth—" "No," she cut in, louder now. "You're new enough here to not know how these things go. People bring in old forms, old complaints, thinking it's going to change policy. It's not our job to entertain every piece of paper someone drops on a desk." There it was again, that edge. Vanessa didn't yell, she didn't curse, but the way she kept talking around Rosa, as if she weren't even there, was loud enough. Across the room, a man in a blazer had stopped filling out his deposit slip. The woman in scrubs crossed her arms tighter. Even the security guard had straightened up now, shifting his weight, like he was waiting to be told something mattered. David looked at the document again, silver seal catching the lobby light, crisp corners untouched, the signature clear, formal. "Vanessa," he tried again, this time with just a thread more push in his tone. "I think you're missing something here." She sighed, like someone trying to carry the whole building on her back. "I'm not missing anything. You don't know what kind of week I've had. The last thing I need is someone walking in with a sense of entitlement, just because she stopped herself. Too late. David felt the silence again. He glanced at Rosa. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't give her the satisfaction of even raising an eyebrow. Vanessa's face was starting to color. Her words, once smooth, now stumbled slightly. Mallory didn't look up, but her fingers had stopped moving across the keyboard. David took one more step forward, not to push, to witness, because whatever this was, it was about to shift, and he didn't want to be caught pretending he hadn't seen it. Rosa Jean Holloway hadn't raised her voice once. She didn't need to. She waited until the moment thinned, until the words stopped tumbling out of Vanessa's mouth, and the awkward noise from the printer stopped chattering, and even the air in the room felt like it had started to listen. Then she spoke. "I helped write the Riverpoint Community Access Lending Act." Her voice was soft, even, like she was stating the weather, but the effect was instant. David froze mid-step. His lips parted slightly, and for a beat, he just stood there, processing. The act wasn't just a policy, it was the cornerstone of the entire bank's image. It was printed on their website, baked into every employee handbook. It was why he'd taken the job in the first place. And the woman who had written it was sitting in a wheelchair, being told to move aside like a piece of forgotten furniture. Vanessa blinked. Slowly. I'm sorry. Rosa tilted her head gently, not unkindly, but with the kind of patience reserved for people who no longer have anything to prove. The legislation that enabled this bank to open 3 of its inner city branches without government resistance, Rosa continued, the one that capped interest rates on small personal loans, and introduced accountability measures for how minority clients were processed at teller stations. Vanessa's face was blank. She had no idea. David, on the other hand, did. He swallowed hard. Vanessa, he said, more firmly now, I think you really need to read that document. She didn't move. Her fingers rested on the edge of her keyboard, but her eyes were darting between Rosa, David, the packet, then back to Rosa again. Wait, so you're saying, what? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. You used to work here? No, Rosa replied gently. I helped make here possible. The sentence was so quiet, so steady, that it didn't even feel like a boast. It felt like a fact, like history casually arriving to cash a check no one thought she owned. The scrubs woman at the back muttered under her breath, Lord have mercy. The older man in the corner adjusted his hat slowly, a faint nod forming on his lips. Vanessa said nothing. She didn't have to. The silence around her was already loud enough. David looked at Rosa again, this time not just with recognition, but something closer to awe, the kind of awe that comes when the story you heard once in training turns out to be sitting quietly in front of you, and you almost let someone talk over it. The door to the back office opened with a faint click. Dana Kaplan stepped out holding a half-folded tablet in one hand, annoyance in the other. Her heels clicked once against the tile, sharp and decisive, as she adjusted the collar of her blazer and scanned the lobby like someone expecting to diffuse a minor inconvenience before her second coffee. Vanessa, I heard some. Then she saw her, and everything stopped. Dana's mouth hung open just a little, her eyes locked on the woman in the wheelchair, her frame upright, her documents neatly stacked, her presence unmistakable. Mrs. Holloway, she said, voice catching in her throat. I didn't know you were coming. The lobby wasn't silent. It was holding its breath. Vanessa stiffened. Her eyes darted sideways. Mallory turned her screen off without touching a key. Rosa didn't blink. She didn't smile, either. I understand unannounced visits aren't always convenient, she said, but I've found they tend to show things in their truest form. Dana's shoulders dropped half an inch. It wasn't just recognition. It was reverence trying to remember if it had made a mistake. Of course, Dana said quickly, stepping forward. Let me take you into my office. She reached for the packet without asking. The moment her hand touched the top sheet, her face shifted. She knew the seal. The signature. She knew exactly what she was holding. David stepped back, giving them space. Vanessa didn't move. She looked pale now, like she'd swallowed something cold. Dana flipped the first page, scanning it with the speed of someone who had once written memos about this very policy, but hadn't expected it to walk in on a Monday morning. This is, yes, Rosa said gently. That's my updated audit request, including accessibility observations, and an addendum for teller interactions. Dana didn't look up right away. When she did, her expression had changed. Not just from irritated to alert, but from confident to measured. Right this way, Mrs. Holloway, she said, stepping aside. Rosa gathered her papers, her bag, and wheeled forward, slow and steady, never once looking at Vanessa. The doors to the office closed quietly behind them, and the lobby finally exhaled. But nothing felt normal, not the soft hum of printers, not the polite clacking of a keyboard restarting, because what had just happened didn't feel like protocol. It felt like reckoning. Vanessa turned to David. Why didn't anyone tell me who she was? She whispered. David didn't answer. He just looked at the office door, and thought, because you never asked. Behind the glass walls of her office, Dana Kaplan sat with her elbows resting on the desk, her eyes fixed on the document spread open before her. The silver seal caught the fluorescent light just enough to make it feel like something sacred. Rosa sat quietly across from her. She hadn't removed her shawl. She hadn't said a word since entering the office. She didn't need to. The papers spoke louder than any voice could. Dana's lips moved silently, as she read, line by line, her brow furrowed in slow degrees. She flipped to the second page, then the third, And when she got to the final section, the addendum marked confidential, personnel observation notes, her throat tightened. This wasn't a complaint. It was a notice, a formal internal audit request, signed, time-stamped, and pre-approved through the Community Oversight Division, triggered not by rumor, but by Rosa Jean Holloway herself. And it wasn't coming in a month, it had already started. Dana leaned back in her chair, hands folding tightly in her lap. Across from her, Rosa adjusted the strap of her bag and waited, calm, present, the stillness of someone who's seen this moment too many times to rush it. Out in the lobby, Vanessa stood at her station, fingers twitching on the edge of the counter. She kept glancing at the office door, like it owed her an answer. After 2 more minutes, she couldn't take it. She marched over, heels sharp against the floor, and knocked twice on the glass. Dana looked up. Vanessa didn't wait to be invited. She opened the door. "Dana, I just want to explain." Dana held up a hand. Not rude, not loud, but final. "I need you to stop talking," Dana said, voice low. Vanessa blinked. "I didn't know who she was. If someone had told me, you didn't need to know who she was," Dana said, still seated. "You just needed to treat her like she mattered." That hit harder than any reprimand. Vanessa faltered, "But she was being pushy, and I was trying to—" "You were trying to dismiss her," Dana snapped, sharper now. "You treated her like a nuisance. In front of staff, in front of clients. And now," she slid the document toward her, "she's not just a client, she's part of the team that makes these audits happen. She's the reason half this branch exists." Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. Rosa didn't look at her. She was already refolding her documents. Like the moment had served its purpose. Dana stood, her voice steadier than Vanessa had ever heard it. "You can return to your station," she said. "I'll be speaking to you shortly." Vanessa backed out of the room slowly. Not defeated, but unraveling, because now she understood, this wasn't going away. The office door shut, with a soft click, but the silence it left behind was thunderous. No voices, no movement, just the low, steady hum of fluorescent lighting, and a single fax machine churning paper in the distance. Mechanical, indifferent, unaware. Vanessa lingered outside the door for a moment, then drifted back to her counter like a leaf falling out of place. Her heels sounded different now, no longer sharp, no longer purposeful, just small. At desk 3, David remained standing. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. He looked toward Mallory, then to the rest of the lobby, where the regular rhythm of transactions had stopped altogether. No one was typing, no one was filing. Clients who had come in for balance updates and wire transfers now sat quietly, watching something they didn't fully understand, but instinctively knew mattered. And then, finally, David spoke. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "She's the reason we even have ramps in this building." The words floated out across the room like a quiet revelation. The woman in scrubs near the ATM let out a slow breath, like she'd been holding it the entire time. The older gentleman in the corner nodded once, solemn. Even the security guard by the front door adjusted his stance, his expression softening as the weight of what had just happened began to settle. Mallory looked over at Vanessa, whose hands were trembling faintly on the edge of her keyboard. The color had drained from her face. "She's that Rosa Holloway," Mallory whispered, almost to herself. David didn't answer. He just sat down slowly, like he didn't want to disturb the air any more than it already had been. Vanessa stared at the telescreen in front of her, the login prompt blinking patiently, waiting for a password she suddenly couldn't remember. Out in the lobby, the teenage boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Is she famous or something?" His mother shook her head gently, her eyes still on the closed office door. "She's something better," she said. "She's real." And still, the room didn't return to normal. Phones rang, but no one rushed to answer. A printer lit up, but the page went uncollected. Because when something true shifts a space, it doesn't leave a mess, it leaves a pause. The kind that makes people re-see what's always been there. At the counter, Vanessa finally spoke. "Why didn't anyone say anything sooner?" Mallory didn't look up. "Because you didn't listen." The call came through the intercom. "Vanessa Albright to the manager's office, please." The words were polite, even, but the silence that followed them told the rest of the story. Vanessa stood too fast, knocking her pen to the floor. She bent to pick it up, buying time that wasn't hers. Every step toward the office felt longer than it should have, as if the floor itself had lengthened, just for her. When she reached the door, Dana didn't greet her. She was already seated behind the desk, her laptop open, cursor blinking at the edge of a paused video frame. Rosa Jean Holloway sat across from her, same posture, same presence, unbothered, observing. Vanessa hesitated in the doorway. Dana didn't ask her to sit. "Come in," she said. "Close the door." She did. Dana tapped the spacebar. The footage rolled. Rosa entering the building, rolling slowly across the lobby, approaching the counter, and then Vanessa's voice. "Sweetheart, you're in the way. Probably just here to complain. Grandma paperwork. These people think they're owed something." Each sentence landed like a dropped glass. And then silence. Vanessa couldn't look at the screen. Her eyes were on the floor. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered. Dana didn't blink. "But you said it." "I didn't know who she was." Dana's voice was flat. "You shouldn't have needed to." Vanessa's breath caught. "I was just having a hard morning. I was overwhelmed. We've been short-staffed and, Vanessa," Dana said, voice quiet but edged. "Do you think any of that matters right now?" Vanessa looked up. Her mascara had smudged slightly under one eye. "No," she said. Dana nodded once. "I've reviewed the footage twice. I've also submitted a copy to Legal and Internal Affairs." Vanessa's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Rosa hadn't spoken. Not once. She didn't look angry. She didn't look vindicated. She simply looked done. Vanessa turned to her, voice small. "I didn't mean to offend you." Rosa finally looked up. Her expression was calm, not cold, just clear. "You didn't offend me," she said softly. "You revealed yourself. That was all." Dana closed the laptop. "I'm placing you on immediate administrative leave," she said. "Final determination will come after review, but I suggest you begin collecting your personal items." Vanessa nodded. She didn't argue, didn't cry, just stood there, smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. She walked to the door, opened it slowly, and stepped back into a lobby that no longer looked at her the same way. Rosa didn't ask to speak. She waited until Dana opened the office door and stepped aside. Waited until the staff, some still pretending to work, others frozen mid-keystroke, realized she was no longer behind the glass. The lobby quieted again. Not tense now, just reverent. Dana cleared her throat and gestured gently. "Mrs. Holloway has something she'd like to say." Rosa wheeled herself a few feet forward, not to center herself, but to make sure everyone could hear her without raising her voice. She didn't stand. She didn't need to. Her presence stood taller than most ever could. 6 employees formed a loose half-circle in front of her. David near the front, Mallory just behind. The janitor paused near the back hallway. Even the security guard took off his cap. Rosa looked at each of them, one by one. She didn't look for guilt. She didn't look for shame. She looked for attention. And when she had it, she spoke. "The measure of this bank," she said, voice smooth and low, "isn't in its assets. It isn't in its numbers, or how many accounts you open this quarter." She let the words settle before continuing. "It's in how it treats the people it thinks don't matter." No one blinked. No one shuffled. Even the printer in the back paused, like it knew. "I've worked with institutions large and small," she continued. "I've sat in rooms with men who make laws, and men who break them. And the one thing I've learned, over and over, is this: the real test of a place isn't how it handles its best day. It's how it handles a regular one, a beat past. This morning I was invisible to someone at the front counter. Not because I was quiet, not because I lacked credentials, but because I didn't look like someone worth noticing." Her gaze shifted, not harshly, but with weight. "And I'm not the only one who's felt that." A few heads lowered. 1 or 2 nodded, faintly. "But here's the good news," Rosa said. "Culture isn't built in a moment. It's built in choices, small ones, daily ones. And every single one of you gets to decide what this branch becomes next." She paused again, not for effect, for resonance. "You don't have to remember me," she said finally. "But remember this: every person who walks through those doors is trusting you not just with their money, but with their dignity." Then she nodded once, a gesture that felt like a closing line on a chapter no one would forget. And quietly, without applause, without fanfare, Rosa turned her chair toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open with a gentle hiss. Rosa Jean Holloway rolled forward without pause, her shawl resting neatly over her shoulders, her leather bag tucked in her lap, her posture as composed as it had been when she entered. She didn't glance back, didn't wait for anyone to thank her. She simply exited, like she'd done it before, like she knew that the real impact of a moment doesn't arrive with noise, but with silence that stays. Inside the branch, no one moved for a long beat. The staff didn't rush to resume work. The clients didn't go back to their forms. Even the phones seemed to ring softer, like they understood something sacred had just walked out of the room. David exhaled through his nose. The woman in scrubs wiped beneath her eye discreetly. The older gentleman near the door whispered to no one in particular. That's what dignity looks like. Mallory finally sat down, blinking as though the fluorescent lights had changed color. The teenager who'd been watching all morning leaned over to his mom and said, "She didn't yell once." "No," his mother replied. "She didn't have to." And somewhere in the back, Clarence, the janitor with 30 years and more stories than anyone had ever asked for, picked up his mop again, but slower now, gentler, as if the floor itself deserved a little more respect. By 4 p.m., Vanessa's nameplate was gone from the counter. By 5:15, her login credentials returned access denied. No loud announcement, no final scene, just a system quietly deciding she was no longer part of it. And that was that. Her career didn't end in a storm. It ended in a lesson everyone in that branch had seen unfold, not as a policy, or a reprimand, or a headline, but as a woman in a wheelchair, who carried herself with more weight than any title on the wall. Legacy isn't built through recognition. It's built when the people who stay after you do things differently. And Rosa, without fanfare, without a podium, without needing to be remembered, changed something. She didn't leave behind a memo. She left behind a mirror. And everyone at Riverpoint First now had to decide what they saw in it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes respect has a look. Let it be a reminder. The quietest person in the room might be the one who built it. Comment your thoughts. Subscribe for more true power stories. And never underestimate grace in motion. Because legacy doesn't shout. It shows up, and changes everything.